Good day, everyone. My name is Chris Jonas. I'm the Director of Communications with the National Association for Business Economics. We're pleased to present today's event. Before we start, I did want to mention a few other upcoming events, including the NABE annual meeting, which will be taking place live and in person this September 26th through 28th. We have Lael Brainerd, Charlie Evans, Hal Varian, and Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen slated to speak, amongst many others. We're looking forward to hopefully seeing you there. The early bird registration deadline is September 1st. After that, virtual registration options will be available for those who are unable to attend in person. We also have the 2021 Tech Economics Conference taking place this November. Also will be a hybrid format. This will be at the Hyatt Regency Seattle in Seattle, Washington. More details are available on NABE.com. Okay, on to today's event. I did want to mention that you can enter questions at any time into the Q&A function on Zoom. Simply type your questions into the Q&A function and the panelists will answer your question. We will not have any slides available for this particular webinar. However, we encourage you to follow along with the full economic policy survey report, and we'll be dropping a link in the chat box momentarily in case you have not already downloaded from the website. Okay, now we'd like to turn it over to the NABE Policy Survey Chair. Alon Collette is with Fidelity Investments. Alon, over to you.
Thanks very much, Chris, and thanks everyone for joining. Excited to be here and excited to be joined by Yelena from Bloomberg and Chris from Empire State Development, who will also be sharing in the presentation of some of these results. We had 227 NABE members respond to this survey. That's a great turnout. Thank you to all NABE members who may be on the phone who replied in this survey. And because we're going to be going through the survey in detail, I'm going to just jump right in to the fiscal policy section, and then I'll pass it over to my colleague to cover monetary policy. And again, we look forward to your questions. So one of the questions we asked was, if you consider current fiscal policy to be too stimulative, about right, or too restrictive. This was a split response, with 49% of members saying fiscal policy was too stimulative and 45% saying that it was about right. The remainder, only 4% thought it was restrictive, and 2% really had no opinion on the subject. We then asked, what should the primary objective of current fiscal policy be? And the overwhelming majority here, 60% of respondents, said that it should be to stimulate more robust economic growth in the medium to long term. The next biggest reply, 16%, was to reduce the deficit and debt. And then 8% said address income inequality or stimulate more growth as quickly as possible, with the remaining percentages falling into other. And about the federal debt, so we mentioned the federal has surged higher recently. How concerned are 12% were not concerned at all, 34% were mildly concerned, 31% were concerned, and 23% were very concerned, and no one had no opinion on this. So a significant amount of the respondents, almost 90%, 88% were either mildly concerned, or very concerned about the trajectory of public debt. And then the last question in the fiscal section was, what steps to address current deficit? And again, this was a select all that apply. 60% suggested that enacting structural policies to stimulate stronger economic growth was the most popular answer. 43% suggested restraint, 51% suggested increasing tax revenue, and then only 5% suggested make no policy changes. So those were the key takeaways from the fiscal questions that we asked. And with that, for the sake of time, I'll pass it over to Yelena from Bloomberg to discuss monetary policy.
Thank you, Ilan. So at the time of the August survey, the Federal Reserve has maintained the accommodative policy stance that it implemented at the onset of the pandemic, but the latest results revealed that more than half of respondents, 52% in particular, views current Fed policy as too stimulative, compared to just 26% who held this view back in March. Meanwhile, slightly less than half of panelists, which is 47%, believe that the current stance of US monetary policy is about right. That share actually declined quite significantly since the March survey, and at that time it showed 72% approval rating. The central bankers have officially been debating now for quite some time how to implement QE taper. Since the June meeting, they've been talking about it. The current survey results indicate that more than half of the respondents expect the Fed will start tapering asset purchases by year end. Almost 3/4, which is 74% in particular, believe that the Fed should raise interest rates by the end of 2022, by the end of next year, and more than 80% forecast that they will do that. Last August, as we know, the Fed adopted an average inflation targeting regime, and the latest survey results show most panelists believe that the Fed will be able to achieve the inflation goal that averages 2% over time. That would be 65% of the panelists. 29 say they will not be able to. And last but not least, on the monetary policy front, it's about inflation. We ask a question about inflation. The panelists' views on whether current monetary policy should address the recent spike in inflation are split, which was quite interesting. Slightly less than half, 47% of the panelists, believe that the central bank should not take any action. 49% think that they should. There was also some disagreement among panelists regarding which primary tool policymakers should use to tackle inflation. Some, like 26%, suggest tapering asset purchases. Others thought that interest rates should be raised. That was just 5%. And 18% think that both tools should be implemented. So that is the most interesting takeaways from the monetary policy questions of this survey. I would like to take it over now to Chris to cover the rest of the questions.
Thank you. And basically, we asked a few questions about the recent infrastructure bills. And not very surprisingly, a large majority of the respondents are in favor of the infrastructure bill that recently passed the Senate. It's a slightly different story on the broader package that is sort of out there. With respect to the legislation that passed the Senate, about 43% favored the bill as it was written, and about 25% favored the bill in principle, but would prefer to be a little bit larger in terms of dollar spend and the more like human capital part. About 23% favor the bill in principle, but prefer it to be smaller. And there was about a 5% that just opposed the bill outright. With respect to the larger bill of around $3.5 trillion, the views are a little bit more varied. About 29% opposed the legislation, compared to about 2/3 that favor it in some form or other. Now, moving on to other types of bills or issues facing the U.S. economy, for the most part, there is a plurality of support for economic policy at the federal level that supports small business formation and entrepreneurship. With respect to the issues of evictions or foreclosures, a plurality of 37% want to reduce the role of the federal government, while about 29% favor more support. And then there's about 28% that sort of feel that the federal government's role should just stay about the same. So with respect to the, with respect to the mitigation of residential evictions or foreclosures, this seems to be quite evenly divided or uniformly divided. Now, moving on to some very interesting questions that we had with respect to the vaccine. Almost 8 out of 10 of the respondents favor employers requiring employees to be vaccinated against the COVID-19, COVID-19. And then there was only 14% that opposed such a policy. With respect to the respondents' employers, or in case they're the boss, in charge of the company, about 25% of the respondents indicated that their employers are requiring them to be fully vaccinated against COVID-19, while about 1/3 are reporting that employers are not requiring employees to be fully vaccinated, and about 22% are indicated that they are either self-employed or work from home, and this kind of survey question doesn't really apply to them. With that, I will turn it over back to Chris, and we will probably take questions.
Great. Alon, will you go ahead?
Yeah, so thanks very much, Yelena and Chris, for going through the survey in such detail. If anyone has any questions, please pop them into the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. I don't see any at the moment, but again, I really think there were some interesting results here. Chris has also placed the link to the full survey in the chat function, which has all of the details and several interesting charts as well that I encourage you to look at. Chris, at this time, we don't have any questions that have been popular at this time, which means the report must have been incredibly clear and well written. So, Chris, let me turn it to you if you have anything else, but I encourage anyone to throw in some questions if they have any.
Yep, we'll pause just one more second for questions. Is there any questions? Please put them in the Q&A. And not seeing any, I guess we will close out the event. I want to thank everyone for joining today. As a reminder, all recordings of past NABE webinars are available through the NABE Connect app and through the digital archive on nabe.com. Thank you all again for connecting today. That does conclude the event. We'll